MIDI setup on Windows differs slightly from OS X setup. Nuendo for Windows supports both direct music and Windows MIDI drivers. You'll have the option to set up either your direct music ports or the Windows MIDI ports. If you're not sure which one to set up, then consult the manufacturer of your MIDI interface. Steinberg support can also help you determine which one is best to use. On the OS X version of Nuendo, you'll only have MIDI system category in which to set up your interface. Despite these differences, you'll find that the options are the same for both platforms. In this setup area, you'll find the ability to rename your ports and choose which ports are visible within the MIDI track input-output selection. This is very helpful as it makes it easy to see what hardware devices the ports actually correspond to. To the right is a column that allows you to determine whether this entry will be shown in the master list whenever you choose an input or output port. For example, I have a Kurzweil SP76 as my controller in the studio, and I want to set this up as the first input port. Now I also have a Korg WaveStation SR rack set up on the first output port of my MIDI interface, so I'll go ahead and name that port as well. Next, I'll turn off all the other ports since we aren't using those. Now if we go to a MIDI track, you'll see that the available list for inputs and outputs corresponds to the way we set it up in our MIDI list. This makes a great way to configure your lists with less clutter and makes it easier to quickly see what you have in your studio. And once you do this, you never have to do it again, unless you reinstall Nuendo on your system. Moving back to the device setup page, you have two more option pages that will help you in your MIDI setup. The default MIDI ports lets you determine which ports will be automatically selected every time you create a new MIDI track. And the All MIDI Inputs section is where you can combine any number of inputs into a single entry that appears in your MIDI input list. It will show up as All MIDI Inputs. A good technique to follow is to set up the All MIDI Inputs as your main default input port. This will ensure that any time you create a MIDI track, it's already set up to receive data from every controller in your studio. This makes one less step you have to take when you're ready to call up an instrument and jam out. While we're in the device setup window, I want to go over a few other important areas you'll need to configure additional features found in Nuendo. First, your 9-pin device category allows you to set up and communicate to external video or audio playback devices using the Sony 9-pin format. The VST input-outputs lets you determine whether certain channels on your audio interface will show up in your lists within the Nuendo mixer and the VST connections window. The video player lets you configure the size and format used to play back digital video files that you import into Nuendo for scoring or other audiovisual work. If you plan to use a real dedicated remote control hardware mixer to control Nuendo's mixer, clicking on the Add Remove button lets you choose from a large list of hardware controllers and digital mixers that support remote fader, automation, transports, and other controls to Nuendo. Last but not least, the VST System Link gives you setup options for using Steinberg's exciting new System Link technology. This allows you to synchronize multiple computers running Nuendo or Cubase SX to act and perform as one large system. You can find out more about how to use System Link in our VST System Link tutorial found in the synchronization topic. Now that you have the foundation of your audio and MIDI setup, you'll want to check over your preferences in Nuendo to see if there's anything you want to change. There are simply too many options to go over each category here. However, do note that none of these options will affect the stability or performance of Nuendo. These are all options to better customize the working environment for you. So I recommend you take 10 to 15 minutes and go through each category carefully. Use the Help button to learn what each option does, and then decide whether or not it makes sense to use that option. You only have to do this once, so it's best to do it in the beginning before you get into the thick of things. There are several other setup windows that we will discuss in further detail throughout this training course. I'll show you where each one is located and reference which movie tutorial you'll want to see to get more details about the options it provides. First is the key commands, which gives you the ability to customize every possible command in Nuendo and map them to specific keys, groups of keys, or macros. You can check out the Using Key Commands and Macros movie tutorial in the Advanced Uses and Tips topic to find out more about this extremely powerful tool. Next is your project setup window that gives you access to important options you should set every time you start a new project. You can learn more about these options in the Project Setup movie tutorial in the Project Management and Setup topic. In the Transport menu, you have two setup pages that you will want to check over. The Metronome setup gives you options for customizing the click track within Nuendo and is further outlined for you in the Metronome and Tempo options movie tutorial found in the Synchronization topic. Next is the Sync setup window that gives you advanced sync options for synchronizing external devices within Nuendo. This is covered in more detail within the Synchronization and Setup options movie tutorial, also found in the Synchronization topic. As you can see, it's important to make sure you take the time to configure and set up all your options in Nuendo before you begin using it. Taking the time to do this in the beginning will ensure that you have a stable and enjoyable experience with Nuendo from the start.